Hello, welcome to the debate on Sky News. I'm Martin Stanford. Here's our take on developments brought together from America, the UK and around the world. The Democrat debate, but which presidential candidate was not allowed to take part? Here's a clue.
I'm here to announce my candidacy for the president.
Also today, the horrors of war, abduction, rape, slavery and massacre. What are we doing to save the victims of ISIS? There have been calls for unity on both sides of the political divide, but with a difference. Paul Ryan has told his Republican colleagues, of course he'll be Speaker of the House, but only if everyone supports him. Then the story of the man who wants to run for the top job, but his party is apparently not as enthusiastic as he is. Professor Lawrence Lessig claims to have been marginalised by the Democrats. We'll hear from him in just a moment. But as usual, the Democrat commentator Jeffrey Robinson is in New York, and the Conservative commentator Armstrong is standing by in Washington. Campaign finance reform, Jeffrey, that seems a noble cause.
Absolutely. It's a great cause, along with motherhood, apple pie, and the American flag. But what you're essentially doing if you turn to Congress to come up with campaign reform is that you're asking the poachers to redesign the henhouse so there'll be no poaching. Good luck with that.
Armstrong, shouldn't they sort out the way the money comes from?
I think it's a very important topic because people believe that if you're wealthy and your corporations, you hold too much sway over the political process, and that everyday Americans' voices don't really count. The wealthy donors and corporations will tell you that is a way to exercise your vote and free speech. But I do believe that if you want to think about it on a much deeper level, if you look at what's happening in the current presidential race, and you look at outsiders like a Carly Fiorina and a Dr. Ben Carson, and where you have someone like a Bush, the establishment candidate who has tons of money, but it's not making a difference, and all Dr. Carson's money is raised through $50, $60, and $150 donors, and he has over 700,000, like Bernie Sanders and how well he's doing. I think this is one election that indicates that maybe campaign finance reform and wealthy donors and wealthy people don't have as much sway over the political process as we once gave them that credit of having.
Well, let's speak to the man who wants to be president. That's Professor Lawrence Lessig, who can join us. Is it true, Professor, that you're just fighting this campaign on this one issue of where the money comes from and where it goes?
Well, it's actually a little bit more fundamental than just that one issue. The basic fact about American democracy is that we've allowed the representative democracy to be corrupted. Corrupted in part by the way we fund campaigns, but not just that, the way political gerrymandering makes our House of Representatives this crazy, polarized institution. Both of these realities are a product of the failure of our government to maintain commitment to this basic idea of a representative democracy. And what that means is our Congress can't achieve any of the things that the Democratic candidates are talking about wanting them to do. So it's the unfortunate, embarrassing, inconvenient truth about American government that we have to have an institution called Congress that can actually work with the president to achieve something. And unfortunately, we have to go to that institution to fix itself. That's just the reality of our constitutional design. But I think we need to confront the problem of the institution of Congress directly and try to do something about it. And that's what this campaign is really about.
But what would you do? I mean, it's an imperfect system. Probably most Americans would agree with that. But it's the best one on offer, they might say too.
Well, of course, it's not the best one on offer. What we could do is pass statutory reform that would radically change the influence both of money and these polarized politics inside the system. I mean, one of the problems I think that defines this debate about money is that so many people have spoken about it as if the only solution is a constitutional amendment, which of course many people think is just impossible, but that's just not true. We could change the way campaigns are funded tomorrow through a statute in the United States Congress, and we could change the way Congress itself was selected tomorrow through a statute in the United States Congress. And so what we need to do is to build the movement that says to Congress, we demand you fix yourself. And I think that a presidential campaign is the only political avenue in the American political system for building that movement. And so my candidacy is about saying to the Democrats, look, we have to acknowledge the dead elephant in the middle of the room, which is Congress. And unless we find a way to fix that and to build a political movement to fix that, then this is just fantasy politics. You know, it's entertaining and it's enlivening and it gives us hope. But when we wake up the next morning, we realize, you know, none of the things that they're talking about are possible until we actually find a way to fix it.
Let me bring in Jeffrey and Armstrong at this point. Jeffrey, it seems a noble intent, but look, even if a president campaigned on the issue and got public support on the issue, presidents don't get their own way in your system, do they?
Well, the idea, I mean, the very first job of all politicians is to get reelected. That's what they all do, whether it be in Congress or Parliament in Britain or anywhere. You must get reelected. That's your premier, your first job. And you get elected with all of the chicanery that the professor is against. And I am too. I mean, I agree totally with him, although I do question his idea of changing how Congress is elected by statute. That's in the Constitution. You would need a constitutional amendment to do that. And because it's part of the original articles, it'll just never happen. However, you can have electoral reform, but it would take an overwhelming majority of Democrats in the House and the Senate and a Democratic president to force it down the throats of the Republicans who don't want it because they're benefiting from it. You also have this problem of gerrymandering, which I suspect the Democrats, if they had their druthers, would simply redistrict the entire country in favor of the Democrats. It's what they do because, again, the first job of the politician is to get reelected, and that's one of the ways they do it.
Armstrong, is Jeffrey right that there is no agreement across any aisle between the two major parties about the need for any change here?
Well, you know, I actually think that Professor Lessig and I may have some common ground here. I was really taken back by his eloquence and what he said. You know, I'm always nitpicking to find an area where I disagree, but interesting enough, I don't disagree with him on anything. And I think what he's saying is much deeper, which Jeffrey is not saying, is that both political parties have become corrupt. They protect the establishment. We put forward these establishment candidates like the Clintons and the Bushes and others, and we make Americans in the world believe that they're the best and the brightest that America has to offer to lead our great nation. And this is not true. A part of our political process, especially when the founders had this in mind, they made it clear that every 2 years a housewife, a professor, a farmer would come to Washington to make sure that it would not become so stalemate, so stagnant, that you would keep fresh ideas and keep the interests of the American people at hand. They never, ever envisioned a permanent political class that continued to stay in office, supported by the media, supported by special interest groups, and where the two-party system come together to keep others out. And I do think in order for our democracy to thrive and reach its true potential, we need people like Professor Lessig challenging the system. And somehow or another, he has to work outside of the system where he gets the right kind of notoriety by the media, where it sort of catapults him to a position where the media forces him to get his numbers up, where he does take that stage on the debate stage to express his ideas, because I think many people resonate with his kind of ideas that we've become too locked with two political parties, and it's very destructive for us in the long term.
You know, Professor, maybe you're taking succor and encouragement from the Labour Party here in the UK, who had a candidate who had a couple of ideas, and many of the commentariat said he had no hope in hell. He's leader of the party now, albeit in opposition. But tell me, you want this Citizen Equality Act that if you get your way, you'd bring into force in 2017. Just give us some headlines from that. What would that act do?
Well, yeah, thank you. And I completely agree that the way to recognize this fight is to understand it as the opportunity for an outsider to force really both of these parties to change themselves. It's first of all just not true that you have to amend the Constitution to change the way Congress elects itself. Article 1, Section 4 gives Congress the power to change its mode of election, and it's done it many times over history. And so the Citizen Equality Act would set up a procedure that was outlined by a nonpartisan group, Fair Vote, that would make it possible for there to actually be representative House of Representatives, not this polarized institution we have right now through multi-member districts and ranked choice voting. That would create a representative House, and it would change the way campaigns are funded by giving vouchers and matching funds to small dollar contributors so that we don't depend so much on the large contributors to fund campaigns. This would radically change the way Congress functions. Now, of course, Congress is going to resist it. The insiders are going to resist it. Yeah. That's exactly why I'm finding it so hard to get on stage. But I think the American people are just like the British people with the Labour Party upset that we just saw. I think the American people are incredibly anxious and frustrated with the existing system, and they would step up if we gave them a chance.
You look skeptical, Jeffrey, as you often do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I mean, Armstrong never listens to what I say. He's just against it because I say it. He talks about the political classes that he doesn't want to see running for office. But don't forget, the Constitution was written by a political class, a permanent political class. Jefferson and Adams and Washington and that whole bunch were the elite in America at that time. And then the professor says that Congress has changed many times the way it is elected. Name three, Professor.
Yeah, well, okay, first, Congress was constituted through multi-member districts. Then a statute changed that, and we didn't have multi-member districts. And then in 1967, let me finish, 1967, Congress established the winner-take-all system that we have right now. Look, I'm a professor of constitutional law. This is one thing I know pretty well. Congress has the power.
I thought you were a professor of copyright law.
No, I'm a professor of constitutional law, which I have taught ever since 1991. Congress has the power.
Since 1991, Congress has not changed the way it's elected. It is still elected by districts in the states to form a kind of parliamentary system inside the House of Representatives.
Okay, do you want to put $1,000 on this?
No, he doesn't, because
you may need $1,000 to run for president. And by the way, you're running for the presidency, not president.
Armstrong, let me just get you to interject here. What the professor seems to be suggesting is you might get a richer diversity of opinion represented in Congress. Now, heaven forfend, you guys might have to start doing coalition deals between various smaller parties. Wouldn't that be something that would invigorate American political life?
Absolutely. Listen, I'm not agreeing with the professor because he may be a Democrat or somebody may run as an independent. I agree with him because it's the only thing that's going to sustain us as a real democracy for generations to come. If you look at what's happening now in our own process on the GOP side, they're doing everything they can to undermine Donald Trump and eventually Dr. Ben Carson, for full disclosure, his business manager, because they are not a part of the establishment. They see them as bringing wreckage and wreaking havoc on the system, and they're lost. They don't know what to do. They're just hoping that these voters will come to their good senses and restore order so the establishment can take their rightful place. But guess what, guys? It's not happening. So what the professor is saying, we're seeing happening right now in America with the voter just outraged. They don't want the establishment. They want idea. They don't want anyone with an establishment resume, with an elected resume. It's time to give outsiders. That's why a voice like Professor Lessig is important, because he may not be the one to conquer it, but he starts the tiny drip, the drip, drip, drip that paves the way to really change this lockdown that both political parties have consumed on our political process for way too long. And we pay the price and we lose in the long run.
Professor, let me ask the point here that sometimes people who look at this system say that a system such as yours might allow, hey, the system as it is might allow somebody who's politically naive or inexperienced to get into the White House, but your system might let more likely. Now, that would make America a weaker place, wouldn't it? Don't you have to serve your time in some instrument of government, as a governor, as a senator, before you take on the biggest job in the land?
Well, I think ordinary times, that's exactly right. But I think the problem is when the system itself becomes the problem, when the institution itself becomes corrupted, it only can be changed by someone on the outside. The framers of our Constitution envisioned that when they created the opportunity to call for a convention to propose amendments to the Constitution. That was envisioned to be a way for people outside of Congress to try to rise up and to challenge a corrupted Congress. And that's the same thing that's going on here. I think many people in America look at this institution and believe it's deeply corrupted. But the fact that not a single person on the Democratic debate stage even talked about the institution of Congress, even mentioned the idea of publicly funding elections, even recognizing, as Armstrong is highlighting, that there's a perfectly obvious way that Congress could be fixed and fix itself, is evidence that we need someone from the outside to bring this forward. And that's the primary job that I'm trying to serve here.
Professor Lawrence Lessig, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you.
Now, a reminder, you can catch up with the Sky News debate on Apple TV, on Roku, and on Catch Up. And of course, you can find us at skynews.com/US. Sometimes the horrors of war are difficult to comprehend. We see the pictures and hear the stories. Vian Dakhil is an Iraqi member of parliament. Vian, I want to share a moment from earlier this year when you demanded passionately to Parliament that more must be done to stop the abduction, rape, slavery, homelessness and massacre of your people in northern Iraq by Islamic State. Here's the clip.
سيد الرئيس لحد الآن 500 شاب ورجل يزيدي.
Vian is joining us from northern Iraq on a connection which we hope is going to work well for us today. Vian, thank you for joining us here in London. Tell me, since you made that appeal, has the situation for the Yazidi people got any better?
Thank you for you. Unfortunately, the situation for the Yazidi people, it's very bad. After 14 months ago, when the ISIL attacked the Yazidi villages, since now the situation is same. Since now we have 420,000 people are refugees living in the camps in the Kurdistan region, and we have about 3,000 girls and Yazidi women are captured by ISIS until now. And those people in the camps, they living in very, very bad situation, especially in the winter. Now the weather is a very cold and we don't have anything. We don't have schools, we don't have health center, we don't have enough food, we don't have enough water. And really the situation of those refugees are very bad.
You made a personal appeal, didn't you, to the President of the United States and indeed to his wife to help. What happened after that? Nothing
happened. Yes, nothing happened. I sent the letter for the Michelle Obama before 7 months ago and tell her to help us to help those girls are kidnapped by ISIL. But nothing happened. She don't answer me.
Let me bring in Jeffrey and Armstrong at this time. Armstrong, the United States gets appeals for help from all sorts of people in all sorts of predicaments. But Jan's situation seems particularly severe. Why no help, do you think?
Well, you know, let me just congratulate her on her courage for risking it all to be a part of our broadcast today. And she's only repeating the narrative that we've heard from so many inside about the rape and the divisiveness and how people use money to woo people, it brings about divisions among families, and talk about how people are kidnapped and how children are treated like animals and are subjugated. You know, listen, there are millions of crises that would love to get the attention of the First Lady and our President of the United States. And just because we hear the horrors through her emotions as she tells her story doesn't mean that her horrors and that narrative have reached the doorsteps of the White House. They're probably just unaware. It's not the necessary channel. If you're really looking for real help and real solutions to your issues, is going directly to the White House. There's so many other channels that you have right where you are. There are diplomatic channels. There's the UN. The President of the United States, listen, I mean, the fact that you've not heard anything from the White House is not an indication that they just don't care. It's just that so many people are bombarding them constantly and their staffs with issues very similar to this. But it does not minimize in any way the horror that continues to exist in a place like Iraq. And I'm just curious, you know, I know Jeffrey has to get his input in on this, but I'm just wondering what she would feel that we could do to be helpful to her, especially for people like us in the media who have platforms where we can make a difference, to give rise to voices like hers, because obviously what she needs is more attention to her, the situation she finds herself in, so more people who are right near where she is can sort of give some outpouring of support to help sort of minimize the circumstances that she faces.
Jeffrey, we'll come to Vian in a second, but Jeffrey, it is a complex situation over there, and the Americans are doing what they would say are some things to try and tackle ISIS, but in the Yazidi case, it's not enough, is it?
Well, listen, I want to stand shoulder to shoulder with my friend Armstrong on this one. He's absolutely right. Jan, you are fighting the right fight, and the world is standing with you. The fact that you haven't heard from Michelle Obama says to me, as it does to Armstrong, she never got the letter, because she's the kind of person who would respond if she knew. So write her again. Write every member of Congress, write every member of the Senate, write to the UN, keep the campaign alive, because as I say, you are fighting the right fight. It's a very difficult thing for any government to come up with the right solution, because this may be one of those problems where there is no right solution. But you're on the side of right and of God. These days, unfortunately, it takes God and the side of right a little bit longer than it used to make things right.
And Vian, as Armstrong suggested, if there is a shopping list, if there's one or two things you would like done right now, what are they?
The very important things now, I am looking for anyone to help those girls to escape them from ISIS control. And we need anyone to help us, especially the international organization, for sending the humanitarian things for those refugees people. And we need someone to help, because we have many girls they can't escape from ISIL, but the situation for those girls or for those women or those children are very, very terrible, especially psychological situation of them. But we don't have any center help, or we don't have any center to help those escaped girls to give him a treat or a rehabilitation care to help them for that, because that we need many things from international countries. But I would like to say something. I know the problem in the world is very big, but the Yazidi case, it is very different. It is the first time one of small community living in Iraq, the ISIL who in camp kill all the men and kidnapped all the women and children, kill them, rape them, abuse them. This is a new case. This is not something like a war or some problem. I know that there are very problem in the world, but this case is a very special case. Especially, we don't have any lobby, any strong lobby in the West or in any place of the world to help us.
What about your other MPs in the Iraqi parliament as such? Do you not have any sympathy from them to see if they can use their influence to help the women and children you talk about?
Unfortunately, the situation in the Iraq in general, it's very terrible. I know some of them, or most of those members of the Iraqi parliament like to help me, but we can't do anything because the situation for Iraq is very bad. There are some problems from Sunnah, from Shia, from Christian, all of them are in problem. I think they can't help me. Now, who can help me? The international countries. Not help me, I mean help my community.
And Jeffrey, this is, as you indicated, a tough nut to crack, isn't it? Because there are so many players now. We know the Russian involvement in Syria is causing concern. We know the French are over there. We know the Turks are getting worried about what ISIS are doing. To say it's a mess is an understatement.
It is a mess. And while you and Armstrong and I can't shift the river, we may be able to move a few drops of water in the other direction. So let me volunteer this, and I'm sure Armstrong will join me, and I hope you will too. If Vian will send us enough information in English, we will use our social media resources to try and get this word out. This program will go out on social media. We will do what we can, even sending tweets and Facebook messages directly to the White House and various members of Congress and the United Nations to see if we can't move this thing forward. I know Armstrong will join us, and I certainly hope Sky will too.
Vian, it must be very difficult for hope, for optimism of any kind to survive in the predicament of the Yazidi people right now. But as you face another winter, how do you think the spirit of the people is right now?
Almost the Yazidi people are lost the hope for the future, really, because anyone, any family, if you give any Yazidi family and to ask them about the future, they don't know. Everything is dark for us because I tell you, no schools for the children. And almost of those families now in the camps, they lost one of her family or their family lost them. Some of them are killed and some of them are kidnapped, and they don't have any income, any school, no anything, no future, really. We all things now, it's a dark for the Yazidi people.
Vian, thank you very much. Jeffrey and Armstrong, thank you both for your conversation today as well. And that's it for this edition of The Debate. You can continue watching Sky News on Apple TV, on Roku and Catch Up, and of course on skynews.com. Until next time, goodbye.